Would you like to be somebody who knows how human evolution is quite immoral and politically incorrect? Then listen to this entire video where I explain how the human genome, the DNA of humans, is coded to make it survive, obviously, and that can manifest itself in political incorrectness and also racist behavior. So before we get into this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you'd like to learn more about self-development, dating, Jungian psychology, and how to reduce suffering in life. Let's get into it. So according to Google, the definition of political incorrectness is, quote, the avoidance of forms of expression or action that are perceived to exclude, marginalize, or insult groups of people who are socially disadvantaged or discriminated against. So I would also extend to that, it's essentially, I think, insulting any kind of group of people or marginalizing them. It doesn't matter if they're discriminated against or not. It's just simply the marginalization, or not the marginalization, but the exclusion or the insulting of anybody. Now, political incorrectness is becoming a lot more prevalent in society. It is demanded when you give speeches, and in politics, obviously, political correctness, is demanded. Now, I can understand why, because you don't want to encourage anything like really hate speech, or nobody feels comfortable if they are insulted, obviously. But the problem is, the downside is, life is difficult and painful and ugly a lot of the times, and when you are prohibited from speaking about it, it prevents you from actually having the opportunity to solve the pain or the ugliness of the problem, and that's really dangerous. Okay, so it is important to acknowledge that our biological composition is dark and politically incorrect, and it is crucial to face the fact of this, or else we are not able to progress and try to solve the core of the problems that our genome produces. Because when you deny the inherent truthful nature of ourselves, you drift from the traits that characterize the problem we face. And this is the case for any kind of problem. You cannot solve problems if you don't face the core of them. Every problem is idiosyncratic and has specific traits that characterize it. And if you don't look at the problem properly, you end up making like a half-measured solution. You hope it will fit the problem and solve it, but you didn't really look at the problem. So yeah, the likelihood of that solution solving the problem is very small, because the problems are very authentic and specific. So you need to face the root of the problem in order to give yourself the opportunity to face it, and that is key. So I'm going to give a few examples now of how the human genome is politically incorrect and inherently sort of discriminative in some senses. Okay. Now, this information, by the way, is from Brett Weinstein and Jordan Peterson in their podcast in the Joe Rogan Experience podcast. This is where I got the information from, and I found it really fascinating, so I have to share it with you. Brett Weinstein is an evolutionary biologist, so he's somewhat, he's quite reliable when discussing evolution or evolutionary biology. He says, which is quite relevant to today, the human genome does not have the proclivity to be sexist, but it does have the proclivity to be racist. Here's why. The human genome can't really be sexist because, like oppressive towards women specifically, because if humans were coded to create a patriarchy where women are oppressed, then within one generation, there is a 50% chance of the genome ending up being oppressed by the very own system that it created. So if you build a patriarchy, and then couples mate and they have offspring, and after one generation then, there's a 50% chance of the child being a boy or a girl, and because there's a 50% chance of it being a girl, the genome might end up being oppressed by the very system it created, and that it wouldn't do that because that's too self-harming and would decrease the probability of it surviving. Because if the women are oppressed, that also it endangers the I would say, the ability to reproduce healthily and raise healthy kids then. So the genome would not really be inclined to do that necessarily. But the genome is more racist. Now, there's an example of, well, let me put it like this. Groups of humans, of, let's say, tribes, have the proclivity to exploit other groups for their own benefit because it increases the survival rate of its own in-group. So they are inclined to be offensive and, let's say, not welcoming or protective against external foreign groups. Now, here's an example of how the genome can be coded to manifest ethnic discrimination or religious discrimination. So, Jordan Peterson mentioned something really very interesting. He was discussing the connection between orderliness and political conservatism. He said, when you look at the personality trait, like of the big five personalities, that framework, one of them is conscientiousness. Now you can branch and split conscientiousness down into two more traits: industriousness and orderliness. Industriousness is about how hard you work, how industrious you are, right? And orderliness is your desire for order and things to be organized. Now, orderliness is also associated with your degree to be disgusted by chaos and disorder. It's associated with disgust sensitivity. So what Jordan said was, in Nazi Germany, so in the 1930s, late 1930s and sort of beginning, during the Second World War, Germans, first of all, during that time at least, had a high level of desire for orderliness. They wanted order. And, like Adolf Hitler came along and sort of promised this potential for order in their society. And when you have this high level of orderliness, you have a high sensitivity to disgust, so you're easily hurt by disgust. And the thing is, when you're disgusted, the thing that is disgusting you don't only want to get rid of it, you want to absolutely annihilate it. You know when you see a spider and you're like freaked out by it? Your instinct is to just absolutely ruin the spider. You don't want to like pick it up and put it out of the house. You want to just insinuate it. You want to just like burn it down with a flamethrower, the tiny little spider. And that is kind of the same thing what happened with Nazi Germany towards the Jewish population. They were disgusted by this population and had this inclination to want to annihilate it then as a consequence. And the reason why this might have happened is because humans have evolved to have a protective function within themselves, this instinct to protect against foreign groups of people. Because when the Spanish conquistadors landed in southern America, within a few generations, the majority of the Southern American, I'm not sure what group it was, whether it was sort of Aztecs or I'm not sure, but the majority of them were wiped out because the Spanish conquistadors exported illnesses like, I believe, the chicken pox, and that the Southern American genome or immune system was not prepared to defend itself against this foreign illness, and that wiped out a significant portion of the population. So because of this threat to the survival of the humans, the genome was then inclined to protect itself against foreign groups of people, of humans, and that has evolved. And those people who have protected themselves had a high rate of survival because they were not then threatened or did not get attacked by these illnesses, let's say. Therefore, they survived, and that proclivity to protect oneself was nurtured and is very present in today's humanity. And that is a reason why you have this instinct to fear other groups of people, for you think they entail some sort of threat to your survival. And that can explain why people might be racist, actually. So that is why the genome is politically incorrect. And another reason why order is, let's say, very important for survival, because in a society, in an organized society, you need order, and without a society, humans can't, or the rate of survival for humans is a lot lower, because, as you know, in the Game of Thrones, the lone wolf dies and the pack survives. If you stick together, you can divide tasks, the division of labor, which can make everybody wealthy and increase the level of the standard of living. And that's super important, because it increases, like, your biology wants that, because it increases the rate of your survival. So if we bring this back to political incorrectness, we could say, I mean, the genome has evolved to be politically incorrect because it increases its rate of survival. At least in the past, that has been the case. And we need to acknowledge this inherent nature of ourselves, because we can then try to be able to overcome it. We can say, okay, well, it worked for us in the past, but now we can try to transcend this sort of unconscious bias, this unconscious bias against other ethnicities, let's say, and consciously try to overcome it. Because if you don't face the fact that it exists, you try to make up some other excuse for why people are racist, or something like it's all culture, it's none of it has to do with biology, which is not the case. It is genetic. Then, I mean, it's universally genetic, I think. Then, if you don't acknowledge that, you always make up some other problem which doesn't really solve the core of it, and the racism will continue to sort of prevail, basically. So, in conclusion, the human genome and evolution has been politically incorrect because it has enabled humans to survive by protecting themselves against other groups of humans, and that has ingrained itself in the genetic composition of humans nowadays, and that is an explanation for racism nowadays. And the human evolution was an immoral process with, I don't know how many genocides, how many horrific atrocities occurred, and we need to face the fact that it's dark, and we need to acknowledge it, because that can actually give us it actually gives us the opportunity to prevent it. Because if you hide the history of humanity, you do not understand it. You overlook the knowledge on human nature, which can benefit you and actually help you prevent these atrocities from reoccurring in current days. And we have the potential to re-manifest what has happened in history. We are not beyond it. So please leave a comment below whether you have any other explanations for why the human genome might be inclined to be racist, and whether you understood my explanation or not. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you'd like to learn more about self-development, dating, Jungian psychology, and how to reduce suffering in life. Thank you for listening.